Now, France has technically lifted its coronavirus blockade and will now allow truck drivers stranded in southern England to cross into the country. But they first have to test negative for COVID-19. France is also allowing passengers from other EU countries to travel from Britain. Borders were closed to travelers from the UK on Sunday after a fast-spreading coronavirus variant was identified there. Britain says it will take 2 to 3 days to process the current backlog of vehicles.
What a way to spend the last days before Christmas. Hundreds of trucks queued on the road to Dover, in a line that stretches on and on and on, for dozens of kilometres. Some pulled over into the service stations. Okay. It's here we meet Eberhard Schweitzer and Ottmar Ganter from Germany.
We want to spend Christmas at home with our family. It'll be very bad if we can't. My wife has been really upset since she found out about all this. But what can I do?
These drivers couldn't have known the French border would suddenly slam shut on Sunday. Since then, they've been stranded here, some forced to literally live life on the road, their anger growing as the hours pass.
Why I'm here? 2 days, 3 days, there's people here with
stay here, no.
Small children in the bus, don't have food, don't have water.
The closure of Dover didn't just hurt drivers. 1/5 of all goods bound for Britain passed through the port. Supermarkets had warned of shortages of basic goods if the port had remained closed much longer. A key demand from France before reopening its border was testing the drivers.
Getting those tests up and running, can happen relatively quickly. But in terms of the details of that is something that both the Transport Secretary and his counterpart will be discussing right now. So I don't want to speculate in terms of, the nature of the testing and how soon that could be up and running.
All truckers will now be tested, but that is set to be a huge logistical challenge with thousands stuck on various roads. And time is of the essence. Only when test results come back negative will the stranded truckers finally be allowed to head home.
The news will come as a relief to British supermarkets, which had already seen panic buying and some shortages of specialized products.
Long lines are a common sight so close to Christmas, but empty shelves are not. Britons in many parts of the country, worried about potential food shortages, rushed to supermarkets in recent days. Panic buying is leading to empty shelves in many markets. Choices are limited for Christmas shopping. After all, much of the country has re-entered strict lockdowns. Supermarkets are among the few places allowed to open. Some shoppers take it in stride.
Oh, it's pretty good. I think most people are sort of just going about their business. The shelves are pretty empty in the Christmassy goods area, so I guess more people are shopping here because all the other shops are shut now.
The cause of the current shortages are likely due to panic buying alone. Distributors say shelves could stay empty as the effect of the border closure makes its way down the supply chain. Britons may get their Christmas dinner as usual this year, but whether stores will be fully stocked after the festive season seems unlikely.
Let's get more on this from James Sibley. He's the head of international affairs at the UK's Federation of Small Business. Welcome to the program, James. What do you hear from your members? How important is it to them that this border issue is resolved?
Good morning. It's incredibly important. So the route, particularly the Dover-Calais crossing, is incredibly important to businesses in all kinds of sectors, but particularly those who are exporting perishable goods. So things like vegetables, sea fish, that kind of thing. And it's really vital that this is now reopened, and it's equally vital that we get traffic moving as quickly as possible.
How dependent are your members on cross-border deliveries from the EU?
So very dependent. I mean, half of the UK's goods exports are to the EU, and about 20% of our exports go via the Dover-Calais crossing alone. So keeping cross-border trade moving is incredibly important. And then, of course, there's imports as well. Particularly this time of year, imports of fresh food is particularly prevalent from the EU as we don't grow certain things in the UK during winter.
Now, the root of this whole dispute was this new variant of the coronavirus spreading through Britain. Now, as a result of that, there's a third lockdown in large parts of the country. How's that impacting small businesses?
It's having an incredible impact. So we have, at the latest estimate is that there's over 170,000 businesses across the southeast and London that have been ordered to close due to the Tier 4 restrictions that have been brought in by the government in response to the latest mutant form of COVID. And it's particularly hard for businesses at the moment because we are, when the restrictions were brought in, it was just a week before Christmas. This is one of the busiest times of year, particularly for those in retail and hospitality, and they've been ordered to shut at the last moment. And the other thing is that over the past few months, we've had, businesses have been ordered to reopen, to shut again. New restrictions have come in. They've had to familiarise themselves with. It's been a really tough year, but also a tough end to the year.
Now, James, these long lines of trucks that we're still seeing, despite this border issue being resolved, is this a vivid example of what the situation might look like if there is no post-Brexit trade deal between Britain and the EU, for which there's only a week left to strike?
So we're likely to see disruption, particularly in the first half of next year, and you are likely to see queues of lorries. But that's primarily because the time taken to move through the border is going to take much longer due to the increase in checks, due to leaving the customs union in a single market. We're hopefully unlikely to see a repetition of the border being fully closed due to public health policy, but we are likely to see disruption for sure, and that unfortunately is probably going to mean queues and disruptions to the supply chain.
James Sibley of the UK Federation of Small Businesses, thank you for talking to DW.
Thank you.
Let's go right to London. DW's Birgit Maas is standing by for us there. Hi, Birgit. France has now eased its ban on travel from Britain on the condition of a negative coronavirus test. How are those plans for testing going?
Sumi, as far as I know, it's still in preparation, but supposedly really imminent, and the army is supposed to help the NHS workers and clearing up this huge backlog of trucks there in Dover and around Dover. There were pictures of some scuffles between truck drivers, what looked to be truck drivers, and the police, because there is obviously frustration with people having been stranded there, not having enough food, not having enough toilet facilities, and they desperately want to go home for Christmas, as we have seen and report. But it's underway, and hopefully in the next days, the backlog will be cleared.
What about travelers who are stranded in the UK or trying to reach other countries? When will they be able to leave?
The first ferries have been disembarking in France. There's a huge relief that the French have now relented. It's been a very tense diplomatic issue. There were many commentators, newspapers here in the UK who have blamed the French president Emmanuel Macron, and one tabloid paper even called him a COVID-idiot, so quite derogatory term. It's a huge relief that now many countries, not just France, are thinking or have started opening the borders again. We have seen the Bulgarian government issuing a statement that Bulgarian citizens subject to a negative COVID test can now return home. So slowly the situation in other countries, not just European countries, but countries across the world, it looks like there might be an easing of the ban on UK travellers and on the outbound flights from the UK, obviously subject to negative COVID tests. And this is a practical hurdle for many people who want to leave the UK and return home, because that needs to be arranged and needs to be done in time. So it's still an organisational nightmare for the UK government.
And there have been concerns about the effect of these border closures on food supplies. So there in London, are you starting to see shortages of essential goods?
Personally, I haven't seen any shortages in the supermarkets I've visited in the last days, but there are pictures of empty shelves, and one big supermarket chain has limited the selling of essential goods, like, for example, toilet papers, and that obviously reminded people of the early days in the coronavirus crisis, where the shelves were emptied and people were panic buying. But with everything hopefully returning to normal soon, shortages should be averted. It's fresh produce mostly that supermarkets and also hauliers have been warning could be short within the next days if the situation isn't clearing in the ports, because the UK imports most of its fresh produce from the continent, from the EU, fruit and vegetables. So this is where people will be looking at and where the shortages would be felt most severely if they really were come to pass.
DW's Birgit Maas in London. Thank you. And we will have more on the impact on businesses and the economic fallout from the blockade on DW Business in around 20 minutes' time. Now, it's been a year since the first cases of coronavirus were reported, and scientists are still trying to figure out exactly how the virus behaves. The speedy development of vaccines is being hailed as a major triumph. It is hoped that they will help end the pandemic, but mass immunity will make it harder to study the infection process. That is why one British research company is hoping to launch a study using human volunteers willing to get infected. DW's Charlotte Shelson-Pill has more.
At just 18 years old, Alistair's volunteering to do what many of us would find unimaginable. He wants to be deliberately infected with the coronavirus. He's campaigning to take part in a human challenge trial to test vaccines for Covid-19.
Challenge trials have the potential to do an awful lot of good for an awful lot of people with while not insignificant, a minimal risk to myself and my health. It's a risk that doctors and nurses take on pretty much every day, like on the front lines of the pandemic, and have been doing for quite a while now.
In traditional vaccine trials, volunteers may never be exposed to the virus. In a challenge trial, scientists hope to study infected volunteers in clinical conditions.
It's in rooms like this one that we could be about to see a world first. Volunteers deliberately infected with the virus that causes COVID-19. Now, volunteers will be quarantined here for up to 2 weeks, with safety measures in place like air filtration systems to stop the virus from spreading.
Trial services company hVivo already runs challenge trials in the UK, but they're yet to be approved for COVID-19.
So you can see we have all of the emergency equipment that you'd expect here, ECGs, crash trolleys, of course.
To make the trial as safe as possible, scientists would first establish the smallest dose of the virus it takes to become infected.
And the pipette will be put just inside the nostril and very slowly just putting small droplets of virus into the nose.
It would offer a unique opportunity to examine the virus in its very early stages.
Of course, these trials are being set up primarily to test vaccines, but there'll be a lot of learning benefits that will come out of these trials as well, not just about how the virus interacts with the immune system and the human body. That will be key and really important to be able to improve vaccines and improve therapies, but also about the disease course itself, about the viral load, how quickly it replicates, how quickly it can be cleared from the body. All of these can really help the management of patients going forward.
With vaccines already being rolled out, hVivo says challenge trials are now more important than ever, warning that traditional vaccine trials will become harder as more of us are immunised.
They're excellent vaccine candidates, but don't solve all of the answers to the world's problem of vaccines. So we're going to need a way of testing the next generation vaccines. Challenge studies will still be able to be used to test very effectively that the vaccine is working, because they can be conducted irrespective of how much disease is going on in the community.
These trials need ethical and regulatory approval, with a decision hinging on key ethical concerns.
You want to select a group of people who are themselves very healthy. They are a low-risk group. They are true volunteers, so there's no pressure put upon them or no undue bribery in terms of financial incentive for people to do something that they're really not comfortable with.
Only 18 to 30s would be eligible, and volunteers will have to be carefully screened before they're approved. But not all risk can be eliminated.
The long-term consequences weigh significantly on my mind. They're definitely something to consider. It's part of making an informed decision about whether I want to participate in a challenge trial. But I think for me, the benefits of challenge trials still outweigh the risks. and I'm more than happy to take the risks on, for more vaccines more quickly.
Alistair isn't alone. Tens of thousands around the world have expressed interest in challenge trials in the hope that the risk of the few will benefit the many.